Hello, good afternoon everybody, and welcome to the video for today. My name is Michelle Wills, and this bizarre letter I want to go through with you and see what you think. I'll just go to the side. Today's date, I don't know if you can see that, I'll just enlarge that a bit so you can see the date today. It's roughly 10 minutes to 4 on Thursday the 9th of April 2026. So therefore I'll zoom down to go back to the normal size. There we go. So here we have then Sanctuary. That's my address. Flat 5 Charlton House, Eastcliff Road, Dawlish. The date, the 1st of April. And you can see it was, let's say, Sanctuary Housing notepaper. You can see it quite clearly there. Sanctuary Housing, Marybone House, 2 Marybone, Liverpool. And then a phone number there, and a southwest, contact us at sanctuary.co.uk. And dated the 1st of April, as I say. And at first, if I'm honest, I received this on Tuesday, 2 days ago, so a day after the Easter Bank Holiday Monday. And this is what it says. Dear Miss Wills, recent contact with Sanctuary staff. I'm writing to you following your recent behaviour on the 27th of March during an interaction with your housing officer at Charlton House. The intimidating and threatening behaviour is unacceptable and a serious breach in your tenancy agreement. I have since reviewed your account over the last 5 years, and I can see multiple examples of similar behaviour which I have listed below. So take that first paragraph. So I'll explain to you exactly the circumstances of what happened, but I cannot go into too much detail because there is an ongoing complaint I made to Devon and Cornwall Police. So it's a criminal investigation potentially. So I cannot say too much other than what happened. I was in my lounge where I am now at Charlton House, and I heard voices coming from outside, and being curious to see who it was, I got up, looked out the window, and I saw 4 persons. 3 female, 1 male. 3 of the female, 2 of the females I didn't recognise. Neither did I recognise the gentleman. The gentleman, it seemed to me, I'm just speculating here, it seemed to me that there was a gentleman, probably we'll call him a dad, and a young woman, I don't know, between 25 and 30, I would say. And the other 2 women were someone I've never met before, but I later found out was a representative from Sanctuary Housing, and also the other person was the housing officer, Emma Bowden. Now, on seeing them enter the lower block of flats, so I'm in flats number 1 to 16. The other block is flats 17 to 30. And on seeing them enter that, I thought to myself, right, I need to speak to my housing officer, Emma Bowden. And so what I did was I exited my flat and I went down out of my block of flats, and between my block of flats and the lower block there is obviously a communal steps, and I sat on one of the communal steps waiting patiently for Emma Bowden to exit the other block of flats. I waited about 20-25 minutes. I was playing on my phone. I imagine the gentleman and the younger woman, I would say, speculation again, father and daughter, were looking at a property, a vacant flat perhaps. But obviously that's just speculation on my point. why we were there is not really an issue. So, having unfinished business with Emma Bowden, the housing officer, which I'll explain later, I wanted to speak to her. So, with the Emma Bowden stayed behind. She was the last person out. As I was sat on the steps, I saw the father and daughter leave. I then saw the other woman come out, and I said to this other woman who works for Sanctuary, I don't know her name, so it's not important for this story. I said, "Where is Emma? Is she coming down? I want to speak to her." And her colleague responded by saying that she'll be down shortly. I waited. Nothing seemed to happen. This colleague of hers then said, "Oh, I'll go and see what's keeping her." So she then went into, this sanctuary employee, went into the other block of flats, flats number 17 to 30. I don't know what flat Emma Bowden was in, but they went into, she went up to get Emma Bowden, and then she came down again without Emma and said, "Emma will be a few minutes." I then sort of just waited. The other woman went and stood beside her car, so she was some 20 yards away from the main entrance, so around 20 yards from me. So obviously what then transpired was, I guess, was that whilst next to her car, this colleague obviously phoned Emma Bowden to say, "Oh, you've got somebody wanted to speak to you." Whether or not she mentioned my name because she didn't know me, I don't know. But I think Emma Bowden would have guessed. We had unfinished business, should we say. So eventually Emma Bowden came out, and I have with me a bundle of papers. And that bundle of papers consisted of evidence. The evidence was in a court case which was held at the Torquay and Newton Abbot County Court on I believe it was the Tuesday, the 10th of February 2026. So recently. So I was asking Emma Bowden. She was in front of me the entire time, walking towards her car, refusing to answer my questions, saying, "I'm not going to answer your questions." Her manager, Scott Vile, the author of this letter, would be in contact with me. Now, I heard back 6 months, 12 months ago, and I never had any contact, email, text messaging, phone, nothing at all. It's just, should we say, an untruth. We'll call it an untruth. Because when someone says they'll be calling you shortly, and a year later you're still waiting, that's not true. So therefore, it's an untruth. So I kept my distance. I wasn't in her face, Emma Bowden's face, as she went to her car. She just refused to answer my questions. So what I did was probably something I shouldn't have done in hindsight. But I said to her, she actually went and sat in her car, and I stood in front of her car, preventing her from leaving Cheltenham House, is what I did. So I prevented her from leaving, and this, I estimate, probably happened for no longer than 90 seconds to 2 minutes, I estimate. It wasn't, 20 minutes, half an hour, or whatever. It was, and she kept on saying, "Please, Miss Wills, we move out the way. We're late for another appointment." She kept on saying, which, maybe true, maybe false. I don't know, and I don't care. So then Emma Bowden rolled down her window, obviously the driver's side window, and I thought, this is good. So I then went over to speak to Emma Bowden. Again, she was sat in the car, I was stood. But I never got the chance. Now there, I'll have to leave it, because you can make your own mind up what happened next. but it's subject to a formal complaint. I've lodged with Devon and Cornwall Police, and they will be investigating that matter. So this is what it says. You ignored motor requests to stop the behaviour. On the 27th March, yes, you confronted your housing officer. I didn't confront my request politely. I was polite, calm. I don't swear. Emma Bowden certainly can swear. She did several times. Get out your bloody way. Get out the effing way were two phrases she used. I was repeatedly blocked their path. I don't call. Yes, I blocked the pathway. Yes, in hindsight, was probably not my finest hour, shall we speak, so to speak. But that's what happened. No more than 90 seconds to 2 minutes. Even at one point, her colleague said to her, "Well, I'll drive. Get into my car. We'll drive away to the appointment, and we'll come back and pick up your car later." Which seemed like a sensible idea. In which Emma Bowden refused. "No, I'm not leaving my car here." So, that sort of, whether or not she thought I was going to damage her car. And incidentally, I must point out, I am 61 years old. I have never been convicted. I've never been to a magistrate's court or a crown court. I've never been charged, and I've never been arrested for any crime whatsoever. I have a clean slate. No criminal record, no convictions, nothing. So, that speaks about my character. Yes, I'm a very angry and frustrated individual, and the reasons will become clear later on in this video. You ignored motor requests to stop the behaviour and stated that you were filming the interaction causing further distress. That is a complete lie. I did not film anything. I've nothing on film. If I had something on film, I would quite happily show it here today. What I did do, however, and I mentioned this to Miss Bowden, was that I was recording this conversation. So no photos, just voice, just for my own protection, my own safety. So she couldn't make allegations that I said things that aren't true, which Emma Bowden has a history of doing, shall we say. So then we go on to this next dot number 2 here. On the 3rd of October 2025, you began confronting an external contractor working at Charlton House, demanding that they were not doing their job correctly. You then proceeded to film the interaction without permission, which caused further alarm. The operative felt uncomfortable with your behaviour, stopped work, and left site as a result. That is complete and utter nonsense. First of all, the 3rd of October is not the correct date that this incident happened. This happened on, and I think I made a video about this on my other channel. This happened on the last date of September, the Tuesday the 30th of September, 2025. Now, what had happened was, it was around, I would say, between 11:15 and 11:30 in the morning, obviously, and I was returning home to Charlton House after I had a chiropodist's appointment. I'm a diabetic, and obviously it's strongly advised diabetics do not cut their own toenails, and I visit a podiatrist once every 3 months to have my nails cut, which it costs me 40 quid per each visit. So when I was returning home, I saw these two workmen. As I say, it was produced in evidence in court. And they were stood on a bank of loose earth, estimated 10 to 15 foot high. Now this loose bank of earth had already collapsed. So instead of having one large bank of earth, we have two smaller banks of earth. And this is the result, the earth is the result of works carried out by the occupants, the tenant of flat 18, who built a barbecue several years ago, had decking and everything, and you invite friends around during the summer, and to be honest, it looked brilliant. It was fantastic. He decided, with it rotting and goodness knows what, he decided to rip everything up and start again. He even spent over £1,000 of the materials, which you can see are still here. I call them railway sleepers, these great big long, like railway sleeper type wood, which he told me he spent £600 on. And he began the process, so obviously moving the earth, creating these two big mounds. I was one big mound at first, which turned into two because it subsided, it crashed, collapsed, whatever you want to call it. And he, soon after it, I don't know the circumstances behind it, but the residents of flat 18 suffered a serious knee injury which is so severe, and I've seen his knee firsthand. He showed me his knee, and he has been off work for 2 years or so, however long it's been, 18 months to 2 years, I'm going to estimate. So, on seeing these two workmen, one of them who was stood right on the edge of this loose earth, this large amount of earth, was scraping the wall, and the guy behind him was painting the wall. So one was scraping, one was painting. Obviously, I could see the horror, having had previous experience in training in health and safety when I worked in an engineering factory in the 1990s. Could see it was a disaster waiting to happen. So I approached these two men. I said, you need to stop this work immediately. I said, for goodness sake. And as I said that, the earth literally was crumbling underneath the guy who was scraping the wall down, because he was obviously in front. Stood right on the edge. And the earth was crumbling as he was stood on the edge of this larger mound of loose earth. And so I said, for goodness sake, I said, it's an accident waiting to happen. So thankfully the two workmen saw sense, and they went they stopped work, so we're going to say around 11:45. I did, it says here I filmed them, that is incorrect. I did, however, take a series of photographs, I think it was about 8 photographs I took of the exact men working there, which I used as evidence in the court trial on the 10th of February this year. I used it as evidence to prove, why because what I did effectively, I stopped a court order, because the court order stated that wall had to be done by the 13th of October, and I wanted evidence, obviously, to prove that I was justified in the actions I took in requesting that they stop. The two workmen went to their works van, parked, I'm going to say 20 yards away in the sanctuary car park, and they were sitting in there. I approached them, and they said they were going to have their lunch, and they're waiting for their manager to ring them back. So I then went back to my flat, and then at some point I looked out my window when I heard a van start up, and I saw these two workmen in the van pull out and just drive away. So what was said in the conversation, I don't know. But as that incident, that was, to me, that was serious. Serious enough, very serious likelihood of danger. And if that was to happen 100 times, I would do exactly the same thing 100 times. Sanctuary should be thankful for me not criticising me for this. And moreover, to prove that I was right, the workman returned, I believe it was the first week of November 2025, to finish that bit of wall that was untouched. And the bit of wall that was untouched, now the mounds of earth, the larger and the smaller because of the subsidence, they actually erected scaffolding. So the obvious question is, if there was no danger, why did they erect scaffolding? So the work was then carried out in safety. There was no safety issue because the scaffolding was erected and was carried out. So that proves my point. And as I say, I would do it 100 times out of 100 times. So next we go on to something I find very, very interesting. On the 31st of July 2025, you confronted your housing officer and a surveyor within the car park who were visiting a neighbouring address. You had both hands on the surveyor's vehicle, preventing him from getting out of his car, and were holding alleged court documents. You then continued to follow both members of staff around Charlton House until they had finished their visit. Now this is what really gets my goat, is a phrase I'm going to use here, really winds me up. First of all, the incident did not happen on the 31st of July, and I can tell you exactly why I know that. Because I have a sister who lives in Somerset, and my sister she lives with her partner, and they have 3 cats. And every summer, my sister and her partner, they go with her partner's brother to Benidorm for a couple of weeks, around the mid-end July into beginning of August sort of thing. So, it says here, on the 31st July, on the 25th of July 2025, I got on a train and went up to my sister's up in Somerset to house sit her cats for 2 weeks. And while she went to Benidorm, and she returned obviously after 2 weeks, and it was end of the first week of August when I returned. So how the hell could I have confronted the housing officer and surveyor in the car park when I was, I'm going to say, 80 miles away in Somerset? Absolutely ridiculous. And what actually happened in this incident, I remember it well. It wasn't, say, the 31st July, it was the 16th of July. Now, what happened was, as it says here, you confronted your housing officer and a surveyor within the car park who were visiting a neighbouring address. So, I was notified by the occupant the previous week, so prior to the 16th, I don't remember what day it was, that the housing officer and a surveyor were visiting him. They had an appointment at 2 p.m. on Wednesday the 16th of July 2025. Apparently there was an issue that while he was doing his building works, he may have disturbed the foundations of the building. That's my understanding. Nothing to do with me, none of my business, not part of my complaint. That was the reason for the visit on the 16th of July 2025. And he told me that they were coming at 2 p.m, had an appointment for 2 p.m. So, with that in mind, I thought myself, well, I want to speak to not Emma Bowden, the surveyor, and tell him what my concerns were, because the previous month, June, I can't remember the date offhand, but obviously I've got documents proving it. There was a court hearing because Sanctuary had yet again failed to carry out the previous court order before a Deputy District Judge Baptiste at the Torquay and Nunavut County Court, and she ordered Sanctuary to complete the works within 13 weeks, the expiry date being the 13th of October 2025. So with that order, the surveyor came, as I say, not connected with me. So at around 1:45, knowing that both the surveyor and Emma Bowden were scheduled to appear, I was inside my flat, and I was looking out the window. And the first thing I saw, which is very unusual to me, was the occupant of flat number 18 get into his large car and drive out of the car park. Which, to me, if you've got an appointment in 15 minutes' time, seemed a bit odd, to say the least. Then, whilst still in my flat, whilst looking out of my window, I saw a unmarked car come into the car park, park up, and I saw a gentleman get out of his car, a lone gentleman get out of his car. Now this gentleman, he had I don't know what you call them, like a piece of material round his neck, stretching down to where his belly button is, sort of, with a name tag on it. Now obviously I couldn't see from 30 odd yards away what the badge said exactly, but common sense told me that's probably a surveyor. So on seeing the surveyor out of his car, I left my flat and I went down to speak to the surveyor. Now the reason I wanted to speak to the surveyor was the fact that the court order, Judge Baptiste's court order in June of the previous month, were that part of a wall which was supposed to be painted and wasn't because of fauna and plants and branches in the way, that they needed to be trimmed, shall we say, in order for the wall to be painted. That was the court order. The wall had to be painted and was not. And so a neighbour alerted me, who'd been here a lot longer than I have, I was here in 2008, that those trees had to stay there because I'm no gardener, I haven't got I'm just repeating what I was told. I've since found it to be true, by the way, so she was accurate. But those trees, small trees, maybe 6 to 8 feet tall, were planted as part of a drainage scheme, because prior to them being planted, the area below, the pathway below, got flooded in heavy rains. So I wanted to alert the surveyor that when the trees were trimmed, not to uproot the trees completely, because of what I was told. Surely that is common sense, and that is, being, as I say, sensible, but a sensible thing to do, So that's the main reason I wanted to speak to the surveyor about. So when I get down to see the surveyor, he stood in the middle of a car park, probably 10 to 15 feet away from his car when I introduced myself. So I'll just go back to this then. On the 31st of July 2025, you confronted your housing officer and a surveyor within the car park who were visiting a neighbouring address. You had both hands on the surveyor's vehicle, preventing him from getting out of his car, and were holding alleged court documents. What a complete load of rubbish. Absolutely 100% untrue. I went nowhere near his car, not within 20 feet of his car. I spoke to him very briefly, introduced myself, everything was civil, everything was calm, and there was not an issue, not a problem. So After about a minute or two, Emma Bowden, the housing officer, pulled up in her car. She parked, she got out, and everything was civil, everything was fine. I explained to the pair, Emma Bowden, the housing officer, and the surveyor, whose name I didn't manage to catch, that I was waiting for them. I was made aware by the occupant of flat 18 that they were coming, hence that's why I'm here. And I wanted to discuss the matter of the trees, especially, because the wall needed to be painted. And of course, the wall where I spoke about earlier, where the two mounds of earth, the loose earth were, that needed to be moved because it was blocking the wall, so therefore how can we paint it? So I said that Barry had, the occupant of flat 18, had driven off, so they had time to scare. And then the surveyor and Emma and I both went to the area where I call it a building site, where the patio was ripped up and the landslip happened. It's an absolute mess, it really is. To say a building site is accurate. And obviously the surveyor started going on about the apparently there's a pipe, an exposed. It's not a gas pipe because there's no gas at Cheltenham House, no gas supply in the buildings. So it must have been a water pipe had been exposed, and he believed that they may have interfered as part of the foundations of the building, which again is not my concern at this time. With Barry not being here, I then explained to him about these two mounds of earth, and they needed to be removed because that wall that they were partly blocking, needed redecorating and painting. The surveyor and Emma Bowden by his side said that they would ask Barry to obviously make the area, tidy up the area, remove the mounds of earth away from the wall, enable it to be work to be done on the wall. I then said to the pair of them, Emma Bowden and the surveyor, that I don't think Barry will be able to, because work has stalled for the last 18 months or so because of his knee injury. And the surveyor then said, well, when we speak to him, we'll ask him, and if he can't, because of his knee injury, he says he's waiting for an operation on his knee for over 2 years. That may be true, it may be false, I don't know. That's what he said. That sanctuary workmen will make sure the area is clear, so the wall is clear for the workmen to paint. Of course, that never happened. The earth was never cleared. Right, I have here a witness statement. Okay, so this here you can see here, George Bennett, defendant. That's the county court claim. Me against Sanctuary Housing. And this was, I'm sorry I'm having to hold it by my hand because it's all sort of creased and wrinkled. I'll just try and, you can see that in the court between me and Sanctuary. Witness statement of George Bennett. He says that he's an asset surveyor in the employee of defendant, Sanctuary Housing, is what he says. But what's more important, what he says, and this was produced as evidence. You can see the date here. The date here is January 2026, and I'll just move forward. Sorry about my hand being in the way, but you can see it's dated here. This is dated. This is a copy I received. Signed George Bennett, dated the 5th of February 2026. So that was 5 days or so before the court hearing. Okay, this is a sworn statement of the asset surveyor George Bennett, who was in court at the hearing, but never was asked questions or was never spoken to. In fact, I'd never met this guy before, and I asked the judge who this guy was, and the judge said probably a member of the public, because of course it's open court, anyone can attend. And the defence barrister, Richard Dewsbury, said, "Oh no, he's the Mr. Bennett, George Bennett, who produced this report." So I want to go to number 15 of his report, and it says, "In terms of the allegation raised by the claimant at GB 13 regarding meetings at which Emma Bowden allegedly agreed that the defendant would remove the piled up earth from the wall at flat 18, I am informed by Emma Bowden that she does not recall any such conversation or assurance being given." So Emma Bowden is denying it happened. She even denies the meeting happened. So, again, that's what it says here. That's what Emma Bowden says. She does not recall any such conversation. So that conversation I had. So what we did is, I'll just get rid of this statement. It's quite clear, quite plain, and a statement produced as evidence, as a sworn statement, produced as evidence in a court of law, in the county court. Emma Bowden, that conversation never took place. And yet it says here, it took place on the 31st July 2025, when I confronted your house competent surveyor. Absolutely the wrong date. So therefore, the two can't be true, can they? So Emma Bowden has lied in her statement. So therefore, the evidence is wrong, incorrect, deliberately incorrect. Because if Emma Bowden, let's say Emma Bowden couldn't recall, doesn't remember, whatever the excuse is, what about the surveyor? He would have known. He would have remembered. Because after I told him about the wall, the surveyor asked me what the area was like before Barry got his shovel and spade and fork and goodness knows what at it. And I said it was lovely. It was a lovely area, decked out, and there were like against the wall, half of the wall, there were like a flower bed done in steps. So you'd have a flower bed stretching out maybe a foot, 2 foot, I don't know. Then like a step down about a foot. Then a second flower bed. Then a third. Then a fourth, maybe, you know. And it was lovely. It was Barry had put candles or lights there, and it was beautiful. It really was. It was fantastic. You know, so he did good. So he done a good job. So I explained that to Emma Bowden and the surveyor. And then, with Barry not in sight, we then went at my suggestion. Everything's calm, everything's peaceful, there's no arguing, there's no swearing, nothing, contrary to what it says here. I didn't confront anyone, you know. We went up to the area, which is outside my block of flats, so we climbed the steps, went up to my block of flats, and I showed him opposite the main entrance the wall in question, the one that was blocked by the fauna, the ivy, the trees, etc. And I explained to the surveyor and Emma Bowden the concerns that another tenant had raised about flooding issues, and also, as well as having a plastered wall, but there is, I suppose, the whole wall. Again, I did measure it. Let's say it's 30 foot long. The whole wall is 30 foot long and about 6 foot high. About half of that, so let's say 15% of that wall is made up, or is plastered. So plastered wall, which needed painting. Filthy, algae, all sorts. The other half is stones, stone wall. It's literally stone, large stones. And the large stones were covered in ivy, creeping right up the full length, and probably going over the other side. It's a boundary wall. And I said to the surveyor that, that my brother is an experienced gardener. He's actually my twin brother, who's 61 obviously years old, and he's done gardening all his life. He works as a plant manager at a well-known garden centre in Devon. And he told me that ivy, in this circumstance, would be considered as a weed. So I suggested that because the ivy needed to, obviously was part of my complaint, the structures, the appearance was awful of the walls, but the ivy needed to be removed. The surveyor suggested that not be the case because he said it will look better with the ivy than without. And that made sense to me, so I agreed with the surveyor. I then thanked them, Emma Bowden and the surveyor, for spending time with me. Obviously, hadn't come to see me. And as they were leaving, walking down the steps, Barry returned, the occupant that they come to see, about 2:15 this was. And so everything was civil, everything was fine, not a problem. Not a problem at all. And so that was it. I later found out that Barry had arranged to pick someone up from a local hospital and take them home, Dawlish Hospital, and that's why he disappeared for around 20-25 minutes. That's what he told me. So this is so far-fetched, such a lie. It's ridiculous, and it is libelous. It is, and I'm seriously considering issuing a libel claim against this Scott Ryle, this person who's written this awful letter. When he goes on the 28th of February, you confronted your housing officer and their colleague during the visit to Charlton House. You persistently shouted their name and followed them around site, being confrontational. You were told not to raise your voice and that your housing officer would not engage in an argument. You apologised and actions were agreed. So yes, that is probably about the only thing that's true. Out of pure frustration, I saw Emma Bowden and an unknown male, one of her colleagues, come, and I did say there were witnesses, and I was out of order. I did say, "Oh, here comes Emma Bowden, our useless housing officer," and I said, "When are you going to do this? When are you going to do that?" Then, once I calmed down, let steam off, we had a civil conversation, and it all ended fine, peaceful, not a problem at all. So, rather make an issue of it now, over a year later, God only knows. So I've turned over the page, so on the second page, she continued there. On the 25th of February 2025, you contacted our customer hub, asking to speak with your housing officer. You reminded that your housing officer would be calling you on the 26th of February 2025. You then advised that you would be calling back every hour until your housing officer made contact. Now, again, it's difficult to know how to respond to that. Yes, it's true, it did happen. I'm just thinking of a proper way without mentioning names because it involves other people. So what I'll do is I'm going to use the character Mr. A, just for this. So this history with me and Sanctuary Housing dates back well over a decade, and I have been complaining for over a decade to Sanctuary Housing, to Devon and Cornwall Police, about drug dealing that was going on quite openly from a particular flat at Charlton House. Now, and this is where it gets really bonkers. I was not aware of this until one of my neighbours told me. In June of 2023, there was a trial at Exeter Crown Court, and basically it involved, I believe it was 26 defendants, and it was it county drug lines. So what had happened was it was Merseyside Police, so it's based in Liverpool. It was Merseyside Police who first began an investigation, I believe in 2021, and their investigation into drug county lines and all the rest of it led them down to Devon and Cornwall. In all, throughout the area, there were 26 people arrested. This individual who resided at Charlton House, his trial was in June of 2023, and although he pled not guilty, he was found guilty by a jury, and he of possession of heroin and cocaine, and he was released on bail to be sentenced at a later date. The judge wanted to try everybody, so all 26, or for some reason, I don't know why, all 26 were tried in Devon at Exeter Crown Court. So it wasn't until November of 2023 that sentencing took place, and this individual at Charlton House was sentenced to 3 years imprisonment for his drug dealing at Charlton House. So 3 years imprisoned. So naturally, most of the residents who've been put through hell with drug dealing going on, being woken up 2, 3, 4 o'clock in the morning, over a decade, no one interested. But Devon and Cornwall Police certainly had nothing to do with this. This is Merseyside Police, and we rejoiced. Sentenced to 3 years. Then, of course, this useless Labour government get into power. And what do we do? One of the first things they do? Prison overcrowding. They release X number of thousand prisoners early. And this individual, this convicted drug dealer who got 3 years, was sentenced, actually served less than 10 months. And he came out in September. So beginning of September of 2024. So sentenced in November 2023 for 3 years, come out 10 months later, September 2024. I actually saw him. I was about it was just before 7 o'clock. I've got a good memory for these things. And it was about 10 to 7. I was dumping some rubbish in mid-September 2024 at the communal rubbish bins, which are next to the main road, Eastcliff Road. So what I witnessed was no crime. There was a guy sat in the driver's seat, obviously the driver, and beside him was this character, Mr. A. And I went over and said to him, "What are you doing here, Mr. A? You haven't escaped from prison or something?" And Mr. A told me no, he'd been released early thanks to the government's scheme, and he couldn't talk long because he had an ankle tag, and obviously he had a curfew. He had to be in by 7 p.m. and it was around 10 to 7. So we just said to police, hello, and that was it. And then he went inside. And what happened? Now this is totally unbelievable, and perhaps when I describe this, perhaps you sort of understand why I'm so pissed at Sanctuary, so pissed at the housing officer. Now this individual first became a tenant at Sanctuary, at Charlton House, before 2008. And he was evicted from Charlton House. He lived in flat 1 Charlton House. He told me that himself. And I'll tell you why he told me that. Um, it was, the rumour was, I mean, I moved here 2008, so I didn't know him before. He moved out, or he was evicted before. The gossipers said it was for drug related, although Mr. A told me personally he was indeed in flat one. He'd been evicted due to non-payment of rent. Okay. So then, I'm going to guess around 2010. Again, this is estimates. I didn't write it down. My memory's good, but not that good. Um, uh, there was a gay couple when I moved in here. Nothing against that. I'm transgender, so fully supportive. So a gay couple lived in a flat above mine. I never spoke to them, never met them. I just knew there was a gay couple who lived up there. And at some point they moved out. I didn't even know they moved out. And a single woman by the name of, I'm going to call her Sandra, to protect her identity. She moved in. And she took in a lodger. Her lodger was her boyfriend. Now, whether or not they were boyfriend, girlfriend before, during, or after, I don't know. All I know is that the lodger was, you guessed it, Mr. A. So, having been evicted for either drugs or non-payment of rent, he is allowed back as a lodger at Charlton House. And he's dealing drugs. People coming around 3 o'clock in the morning, 4 o'clock in the morning, bringing him a comm system, breaking the door down. The front door must have been repaired 15, 20 times, within a 5-year period. It's that ridiculous it was. The police were told, everyone was told, no one batted an eyelid. Then at some point, I'm going to say after around 2 years, the woman, the tenant, so Mr. A's girlfriend, unfortunately was found dead in bed in her flat, and it was a drugs overdose. Yeah, so I'm a foolish landlord sanctuary. They gave him, Mr. A, the tenancy. So he's happily continuing doing his drugs, making everyone else's life miserable. His customers coming around, drunk, abusive, and all the rest of it. Just like acting like we are drug addicts and alcoholics. And so at some point, another woman, a drug addict, lovely woman, I met her, spoke to her several times, lovely woman. Tragedy, she was born an addict, her mum was an addict, and so, she never stood a chance for a poor woman. But she became the new girlfriend, and she moved into the flat, Mr. A's flat, as her, sofa surfer or girlfriend and lodger. And they were always rowing. At one point, there was a vicious attack in which I called the police. He was arrested and charged with assaulting her, assault and battery. And again, I've mentioned that before, so I won't go into that. So it was a very volatile incident. One day, we're going to say 2017, I'm going to say. It could have been 15, could have been 19, I don't know, but it's before COVID. The word around Dawlish was spreading around a person found in an underground garage opposite Dawlish railway station. This young woman, was literally hanged herself. She committed suicide. She hanged herself. She was found hanging by somebody. And yes, that turned out to be Mr. A's girlfriend. So girlfriend number 1 dead, girlfriend number 2 dead. And nobody gave a damn. He's allowed to continue, his everything continues as per normal. Then, well, what I'm going to do actually, rather than continue with the story at this stage, I'm going to pause it there because I see I've been going on for nearly an hour. So to stop people getting too bored, I'm going to stop the video there, and I'll make a part 2 to continue on it. So please do feel to leave comments in the comment sections down below, and I hope you've found it fascinating, part 1, and as I say, I look forward to making part 2, which will be made straight away, and reading your comments. And I make no apologies for the quality of the video. It's basically me with a tablet holding it up against a laptop screen, which the letter is up against. I'm not a filmmaker. It's just about the message, and the purpose of this is to show you how disgusting, how disgraceful sanctuary housing are, and how they will stoop to the lowest of the low, including telling blatant lies in court to cover their backs. So again, thank you very much for watching part 1 of this video.